Hey, everybody. Welcome to Improv FAQ at Length. This is a series of longer conversations about improv topics that have lots of questions surrounding them. I'm James Quesada.
And I'm Bob Wick. That one got me.
Hosting a watch
You got
party.
me.
Bob Watch Party Wick.
Yeah. Gotta host a watch party.
We have a very special guest with us, our good friend, Oliver Georgiou. Welcome, Oliver.
Hello.
I dropped my phone.
So, Oliver, you're a friend of ours that, like many people that we've talked to on the show, we met through Detroit Improv Festival. You're originally from Windsor and are out in LA now. Just one of my favorite people to hang out with. One of our, again, great talks of improv. And you also you're doing idiot work out there, right?
Yeah, I mean, everything's kind of been on hold because of the whole shutdown and all that. But right. The idiot work there. Honestly, it's when I was in Toronto, I would prefer to not work with anyone who hadn't done improv, and now out in LA, I prefer to work. I prefer to work with people who've done idiot or clown. It's kind of like that like step up in terms of like just being fully aware of what you're doing. It's really nice. Yeah.
We would love to do at some point a whole episode just on idiot work, but
right.
and really, I mean, I could talk for days on clown too, but for this episode, we're going to start with the topic of truth, which I think is a great topic because to me, I think most improvisers, when they hear truth as a topic, would kind of hearken to Truth in Comedy, one of the original handbooks of improv from the IO, and the mantra there is that the being truthful to a scene or to the reality of a scene is going to end up being funnier than trying to force it to be funny, and so. It's got a nice root in sort of like the early development of modern improv, but also what I find really fascinating about the topic is how it changes, because like once you get really good at being truthful or just like acting, there still is the question of like sometimes it isn't funny and it's still truthful, and so the question is like, how much do you allow for that? Like what kind of theater do you want to be doing, and is the truth enough to just meet your goals in improv? And so I would love to talk about all of it, but I want to throw it to you now, Oliver, for like, what do you have in mind when you bring up the topic of truth?
Well, before I get into that, just because I don't want to forget this line of thought, what you were saying about is the truth enough, like if it's the truth of the scene, but I feel like asking if it's enough is like giving a yes, but without an and. So it's like, yeah, okay, there's the truth, but now how are you going to make that entertaining? Now, like, what's the most entertaining? What's the most emotionally riveting choice that you can make with that truth in order to make this scene watchable? Yeah, I mean, the truth.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, good enough unless you do something with it. Yeah, you got to make use. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So with in terms of how I think of truth, though, there's so many levels of truth. It's there's like what the world accepts as truth. There's even within reality there are different truths now, which makes improv that much more difficult, because they're basically using improv tactics to make people believe things in real life, which is dangerous. But yeah, it's like, oh, well, I said it before anybody denied it, so it must be true, and they're the assholes, Right. But then there's truth within the room. Like, what does the audience know? that everyone else should know, but maybe you're not aware of it yet because you're not watching from the outside. There's truth within the scene. It's like what has been established. What is, what is your honest reaction to this? But then also, how would your character react to that? And then there's being just true to yourself. It's like, what do you actually want to put out there? Like, what's the is there a bent to your characters or your scenes or your shows, or are you just kind of going with the flow and doing what's up? So yeah, there's a lot of levels of truth, and so that's why it becomes a little bit fun to talk about.
Yeah.
Right.
Anything? Well, okay. So let's talk about truth, your own truth, because it's probably ultimately the most useful kind of truth for an improviser to get in touch with or to practice. Like what rings true for you. And then I would love to talk about how different audiences or perceptions of reality in the world are affected when you start performing. And it's like, well, the different types of truths that do or don't match up with each other. But starting with personal truth, like how do you get someone started who's like being, I don't know, like students who are either disingenuous or like, how do you kind of like paint a picture of the difference between like finding your own truth and I don't know, feeling not that way. Like how do you even point it out to somebody?
Right.
I feel like in terms of students and people just beginning, like finding one's truth, that's finding your artistic self. That's finding you as an artist. And that takes a lot of time. So you're not going to teach somebody that in a beginner course. You're not going to teach somebody that even in a whole core track. That's something that comes with time. But in order to point it out to them in the moment, my favorite method of working is viewpoints. And before you bring up anything from the book, I only really understand it as it was taught to me and as I have developed it in my own self. So, okay. But the way that I was taught was from David Rosowski, who would just kind of stop a scene. And I'd get pissed off at this because I hated being like brought out of a scene to then be shoved back into it and expect to be right where I was at. But he would stop a scene and say, bullshit. You thought about it. You were going somewhere. I saw your body go somewhere else, but then you stopped yourself and you decided to do this because you thought it would be a better choice. And it was disingenuous. And he would point it right out. And so I do that. I'm a little bit more nice, I guess, with my students. He's a very aggressive teacher, a wonderful teacher, but aggressive teacher.
Yeah.
And I stop them and I say, I saw you honestly wanting to do something, or how do you feel about that? I saw you wanting to go somewhere else. Did you feel that? Do you hear it? And they either say yes if they're aware of it, or no. And if they say no and they genuinely didn't have any other impulse, I let them go on with the scene. But yeah, it's just kind of in terms of figuring out each individual moment and the impulse that you have and whether or not you're ignoring it. I feel like in terms of the most basic sense, that's kind of like how you are true to yourself. Letting that physical gut reaction guide which emotion you're at, like where you're at emotionally, guide what comes out of your mouth, as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah. I like that you ask. And I imagine that sometimes people, even if they disagree with you,
right,
there's physical tells and you get pretty good at recognizing when people are hesitating or balking at their own instincts. And even when there's no guarantee that you're right, though. You're not inside that person's head. But when you stop them and you're like, did you feel it or not? I think that's a great opportunity for them to start building their own gauge for that same thing. And I imagine there are still people who feel that they did hesitate or balk or censor themselves or whatever it is, but still would tell you, No, that's exactly what I wanted to do, right? Because it might
Right.
still just be a little vulnerable or sensitive or ego or whatever, and that's okay too. But they at least can get the moment to process what they were just feeling and maybe consider like, well, why did it look like I was hesitating to Oliver or to someone on the outside?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, you're not going to teach anyone anything by telling them what they did wrong. You're, you know, you people ingrain ideas and lessons by how they like that aha moment. It's why QAnon works so well because they
Yeah.
just tell them to do the research and then they get their own aha moment. Then they're like, now I'm the smart one. Yeah. But yeah, it, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just teaching. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
What about for you, Bob? Have you toyed around with like I guess part of the reason I bring it up is because it's
Right.
difficult. I want to be that person. The people who can like point to the moment and be so spot on every time that like bullshit, resounds.
Yeah.
I think it is like that,
That takes time. Yeah.
yeah, maybe someone like Joe Bill or Susan Messing, but like
Right.
I don't know, like Bob, have you had experience with like trying to be that person who's pointing to it and like how effective it is?
Well, I do like that style of coaching or teaching where you do stop the scene for this reason, because I've had so many scenes myself where after it was done, I completely forgot. So trying to recall a moment after the scene, like, hey, right there when you made that decision, where were you? What were you, especially with the newer student who's just trying to make the best choice, as soon as possible. So I do like stopping scenes because that's, and it's just my feelings, my taste. It's not on stage. This is what the room is built for, to try stuff and to stop and go and play with it and learn from it. And I think D'Angelo was the first teacher I had who did that to me, and I do it to my students. And I do like that conversation of, when you made this choice, where was your head at? Or, what were you doing as an artist? What is this true to your character? Let's talk about your character. Let's break down your character really quick. What kind of, what's your character's want? Is it true that you're to its want that you're making this decision? All the little, nuances you hope to bring to a character when you create one. So, maybe that sticks, maybe that gives them the aha moment, or maybe that annoys them. I think it really depends on the student.
Yeah.
But I've had a lot of, I have a lot of good feedback, and I've had people get annoyed with it. So I tend to try the other way. Like, let's talk about it at the end of the scene.
Yeah.
But you're right. Like there are students who and I can't be like, I'm not a psychologist. I can't tell you, or psychic. I can't tell you what you were thinking in that moment, but I can tell that I feel like I can tell that they know that they wanted to make another choice, but for whatever reason decided to go another way, and they just didn't want to talk about it at that moment.
Yeah, and that might be part of the truth thing too. Is that like, how do your learning style, right? Might even be part of your truth, your voice, your identity.
And
well, I mean, part of this.
Oh, sorry. Them not wanting to go that. Them not wanting to go that other way. That could very much be like a very personal thing. It could be a PTSD thing. It could be any of that. And it's like this scene was going in a way that they personally, as a person, were not comfortable with. And so, there's that difference. There's that you as a teacher reading the room and also reading the truth that is presented to you by somebody not wanting to go there. So now you have to deal with it and be the person who can deal with truth better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think part of the job, though, is just to make them comfortable with being vulnerable enough to say their truth. Because I think we're so guarded as humans that when someone tells you it's okay to play, sometimes you need someone to tell you it's okay to play or okay to be yourself. It's okay. Continue, and we can't always do that for ourselves. So if I can do that for someone, that's amazing. I think that's part of the job.
Yeah, or like, so this might be a little off from the truth thing, but just now it's got me thinking that like you also need to like people respond differently to being called out in kind of like the aggressive Wazowski style versus like making your bullshit not that big of a deal, right? Where you're like it's okay. Yeah, you did this, but then you backtracked it. Like you just had a moment where you worked against your own instincts. Like that's fine. Some people would rather have it soften that way. But and other people would rather have it be like, don't do that. Like your first choice, best choice. Don't ever let me see you do that again. You know what I mean? Like it's interesting what people would prefer, how they would like that to be treated in order for it to go away or to be able to get out of their own way.
Yeah. I initially was like, because Bob was saying that some of his students got annoyed by that. I initially, like, if anybody in the first 5 years of my doing improv stopped me in the middle of an improv scene, I would be livid.
Oh wow!
Just like
if a teacher or a coach did it.
Yeah, because it's like because I was like relying on just kind of being there and not like I didn't have this ostrich brain. I didn't have this separation of the actor and the character. I was just getting lost in it like an actor, because that's my background. And so when it would be gone, I didn't have the tools to get right back into it.
Wow.
That flow would be gone, and I would just be it's like, now get back into it. It's like I don't know what, and I would like force myself sometimes, or I'd just say that I had to sit down. And, it's an anxiety response to that, where I just kind of like fight or flight, and I'd either sit down or push through it. But after with the whole viewpoints thing, and like kind of because you're working with energy in the room and how to create tension and how to break it and how to like build it and using your positions and just how you're looking at someone and everything to create that tension. And so now it's much easier for me to, especially when there's an audience there, to like break out, confront the audience and then get right back into it and get that tension right back.
Right.
And now that I know what I'm doing. And so I'm okay with doing it to my students because I know that it's a muscle that they eventually should learn to to have.
Yeah.
Before I didn't understand that it was a muscle that somebody could have. So
no, I'm very much with you. There's something like a lot of times when I stop a scene, and I'm kind of switching subjects, because and I know I said this to D'Angelo when he used to do it to me, and like I'm getting there, and now I can't stand it when the student says that. Oh, I was getting there. Like, no, just do the thing. Stop talking about an event in the future. Like, oh man, when we rob this bank, it's gonna be amazing. Yeah, man, when we rob this bank, oh, I can't wait to rob the bank. Freeze. Could you please go rob the bank? Oh, we're getting there. Like, just
we're building our way up to it.
And that's
it's like the things that annoy yourself. Things about yourself that annoys you is stuff that like annoys me. So it's just like, I feel you, man.
And that's the thing, is like they're talking about robbing a bank, and this is just an improv thing of mine. I'd rather not see a scene where somebody actually robs a bank. I'd rather see the argument that happens beforehand. So as opposed to everyone getting pumped up about robbing a bank, it's like, great, but where's the accusation of the mole? It's like, don't get to robbing the bank. Get to that, get to the, but I understand. It's like, get to the action, get to something active that you can act. Accusation is an act.
Yeah. Okay. Heather made a comment that I want to make sure that we,
first of all, hi, Heather.
Hi, Heather.
Yeah.
But okay, before we do, the difference between what you guys are talking about of like the difference between like just jump to the action versus like I'd rather see it be about the interpersonal stakes between the characters in the scene and all that. Like it just brings to mind for me, like Bob, you mentioned tastes,
Mhm.
and also Oliver, you know, you were talking about like finding your voice, your own style. And I guess I'm wondering like what you guys think about uh people's arc in finding that. Like early on, one of the things that comes to mind for like truth and students learning curves is like when you're kind of being like wacky, or like putting too much on, like trying too hard or whatever it is, and then a coach or a teacher will be like, do less, or play close to self, like learn to play close to self first, and then you can kind of like get more and more broad. But like I also have to imagine for some people that like your ultimate style and voice is going to be a more wacky, broad performer. Um and I don't know, I guess I'm wondering, like, does everybody have to have the same starting point in order to arrive wherever it is that they're going to arrive for their voice? Or like, do some people, are some people just like inherently against the grain on how most people get trained in improv with that close to self approach? Does that make sense? Or like,
Yeah, I
I'm
think I
also
yeah.
kind of thinking about like neutral mask and clown, where it's like you kind of have to strip down everything and kind of start fresh, and then rebuild as a performer. But I guess I'm just wondering if that, even though it would work for most people or seem like a sound theory and approach, do do some people, are some people being held back by that, I guess?
I think that it depends on the individual performer, student, because if it's, I know people who have started off in improv playing very close to themselves and not being able to break out of their own very limited physical normality, and so they are generally, in what I've seen, kind of thing, in the classes that I've been in, uh, they tend to be pushed to do bigger characters, or they tend to be pushed to break out of their physical comfort zone. Whereas the ones like myself, who started off doing only wacky characters, and I'm bent over and was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is an old man. Um, I was asked multiple times to play closer to myself. And I think I started off like that, but then I saw other people do wacky things. So I was like, I want to do wacky things, or I want to be different. Because yeah, when you think about different characters, your initial thought is, oh, I have to change my entire body entirely because that's the only thing that matters, at least in my mind. But I mean, yeah, to be able to pull them back to that, to their normal selves and bodies, and just be able to speak with their own voice, it's a very helpful thing. But yeah, I think it depends on the improviser, and I think any teacher would kind of do that individually, hopefully, depending on the class size, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great point.
Yep.
Is more, it's more about being pushed outside your comfort zones and learning to just be more versatile than it is about what specifically that means for any given performer.
I think so, yeah.
And also I also, like, obviously it depends on what the school is, right? Because if you're doing a specific type of training, you should be open to whatever that training demands, regardless
Yeah.
of if it's in your wheelhouse or not. Excuse me. It'd be
Yeah.
funny if I just started choking up right there.
Yeah. Oh my
And,
god. James really, Oliver, I don't know if you know this about James, but he really, really cares about where people start and where they end. It's it gets him every time.
Yeah.
it might not be your strength.
Everyone's got their start.
You know, some of us start off as robots. Others
Yeah.
as
Okay.
ninjas.
Actually, that's actually a good segue to Heather's comment from a bit back. Our friend Heather pointed out that improv is not therapy; it's therapeutic, which may or may not be splitting hairs. But I think that the great point is that, like, people can get themselves into a lot of trouble by using it as therapy.
Right.
And on the topic of truth, for me, it's like, how do you guys go about kind of drawing a line for students when you're like, explore truth, explore honesty. And if people are bringing in things that are like too personal or too dark, or trying to work through anything from like anger issues to like, you don't want people like breaking down in tears and everything. How do you kind of like find that line between like you're being truthful and honest, but you don't want it to be like too real. You don't want it to be a literal therapy session in class or on stage.
Ooh, good question.
I've only run into it a couple times, but it does come up where people are like literally trying to work through things or like role play through, and I'm like, keep some of it for real therapy. This is not your place.
Yeah. I think it's kind of hard depending on what level the student is at, because I remember when I was in class, there was like a group of gentlemen, like 3 guys who happened to be going through divorces at the same time. And divorce came up a lot during like there was a lot of divorce content during our class shows or even like, during our scenes. And I think that was just what was on their mind. I can't tell. Some of them were projecting. Some of them were just, hey, that's all I've been thinking about for the last 5 days since I got served the papers. So this is all I can think about now. I think there's a line, like, as long as, I don't know, as long as they're doing the work. I really don't. I think it's so like case by case. It's hard to give like a general answer for that.
Oliver, do you have like a kind of like safe space line, or like a way to frame what kind of like personal stuff we are or not trying to bring into it?
I definitely have a safe space line at the beginning of every class, the first class, just letting people know that it's this is a safe place to look stupid. It's a safe place to experiment, and a safe place to just fall into the work and not worry about looking dumb. But it's also everyone has to feel comfortable doing that, yeah. And so this also needs to be a safe space for like no racism, sexism, all that other stuff. And I let them know that right off the top. And I kind of check in. I always check in, especially with the older white dudes kind of thing, because it's, I don't know, it tends to come out.
Yep.
And so I also take that on a case by case basis within the scenes, because the work that I do in viewpoints, and it's a very you have to trust the people in the space in order for it to work. And I've had a couple students where they just immediately would go to like creepy dude, or kind of in a very kind of aggressive scene, and you have to check in with, especially your female students kind of thing when that's happening. If it's in a 2-person scene, and if they're comfortable and they're going along with it and they're calling them out, like if that truth is coming out and it's like going right back at it, it's like, great. And then I usually have to stop the dude and be like, hey, you were just told this by this person. That has to affect you in some way. You can't just keep on playing this unaffected creepy dude, or this unaffected, aggressive person. Be affected by that. Let that change you. But at the same time, not everyone is comfortable doing that. And I've had scenes where you just kind of, you have this character, this actor on stage doing this, and it's a wonderful character choice. But then eventually, when you stop the scene and be like, wait, was something missed there? Like, was there? And the actor is still like this. It's like, oh no, this is a real thing. So in which case, we're going to focus on how this person can be affected, as opposed to this person, because right now this person is very affected.
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to that when you're on stage as well, realizing how you as a person and how you look to the audience, because the audience doesn't know you.
Yeah.
The audience only knows what they see before them, the words that have already come out of your mouths to define what is happening, and the tension in the room. the tension that is created. So the audience doesn't know that you're a good guy. The audience doesn't know that you're, you know, that you help people out. The audience doesn't know that you're a, you know, a feminist, that you march with BLM. The audience knows none of that. So you need to treat them like that, and be aware of what they see. And and that includes, it's like reading the tension not only on stage but in the room. It's like, I need to start being more affected, because right now I'm driving a tension that nobody is comfortable with except for myself.
Yeah. Man.
No, I completely agree. I think I was thinking more of like the actor themselves, like saying something, getting too personal about their own, you know, their own shit, and then bringing it on stage, and then accidentally getting affected. Yeah, and then having it affect them.
Yeah. But I think that it's a good point. That there's physical safety and emotional safety, and that everyone has to feel that way. And so really it is like, if you're bringing in things that are too emotionally heavy, that are so high gravity that like it makes people feel uncomfortable about playing, then that's problematic too for like the good of the group. So that, I think that's a good way to frame it, is that like, you know, we can deal with heavier and heavier stuff as we get more advanced, and we can learn to find humor in it. But for right now, we might want to err on the side of keeping those heavier things emotionally on the shelf, and make sure that we can feel a real difference between what's real and what is the world of play that we're in. Because whether it's like, oh shit, I think this person might be like really crying about this right now, or if it's somebody who's like acting their ass off about being enraged, and it's really scaring your partner, like that has made it harder or impossible for the person to feel safe playing, because they're like, I think this is real, and I can't tell that this is theater anymore.
As a coach or an instructor, have you ever had to deal with that kind of situation or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't.
Like, you don't have to tell me about the exact time. I wasn't like, not anecdotally, but like, how would you handle that kind of situation?
The times that it's come up, one time, and I can't even really remember details about this, but there was a guy who was recommended to do improv because of his anger management, and that was at the time when I think it might have actually been more about it, like a jam or something, and this was at Go, and we had to kind of like have a couple talks about like, okay, you know, you can't not a good idea to bring that real rage into things or whatever every time, and like learn to be in touch with other emotions and all that. Other times it's been less about like emotional heaviness, and more about like somebody who, when asked to be truthful or like honest, like find the truth in the character and the scene and stuff, then starts bringing in real information about themselves. And it's not necessarily heavy, but they're again losing the ability to like build a fiction in a truthful way, and are confusing that with like using facts about the real world and themselves. And then it just is like a reminder that like truth in the scene doesn't have to match the reality of our real world. It just has to line up in a way that rings true, if we are to believe that one thing is true, that the rest is consistent in that way.
For somebody who's not used to, like a student kind of thing, who's not quite used to separating that actor and character, like I said before, that can get dangerous to bring in. I love bringing in real shit, especially stuff that I'm dealing with now, kind of thing, because I can separate it and I have no ego about it. So that's why I'm bringing it up in the first place. But for somebody to bring in real things that they're dealing with in real time, and not be prepared for that, because as soon as the other person or the character criticizes that character, it becomes personal.
Yeah. Yeah.
and then you're dealing with a personal fight now because you weren't prepared for it. You know?
And your C partner may or may not know it. And that's rough.
Yeah, Heather chimed in with another great comment. Just that playing yourself. Well, in Heather's words, playing yourself is bullshit, and I agree. It's like a paradox. And Heather says everyone amps up their own self, which I do agree, and that's actually another like major wall that I would hit about using truth. Is not just a kind of like too heavy stuff or mixing reality with the fiction of the world, but also like when things are too boring or mundane. Like when I started to really focus on playing like straight character and close to self, in agreeing with Heather here that like there's something missing if you are literally playing like your normal self. You still have to be a little electrified on stage, like to be engaging and compelling to some degree. Otherwise, anything from like ending up not talking loud enough for a bit of a larger room to hear, or just like not reacting enough. You still have to, there's a little degree of dialing it up that everybody has to do, even if it's close to self. It's not necessarily literally playing yourself. You're kind of amping it.
I've personally never heard the note play yourself unless it was like you being a guest on something as opposed to actually playing in a scene. I've heard it more as play closer to yourself, and it's usually directed at those people who just do big wacky choices. So yeah, play yourself would be not the greatest in terms of dramatic entertainment or intensity for sure.
And people get it confused. I think that the people, even if the teacher is saying play closer to self, or like I just know that there's confusing language or instruction to be like, how would you really react in this situation? And that's helpful to like use as a sort of guide, but if you really do it too well, you're losing some of the theatrics or the drama of being a performer, doing it for an audience.
See, and I kind of avoid using that term. I usually go for play closer to who you think this character is. If this character was a real life character rather than a caricature, because that's usually what wacky characters like. I'm a cop. I only got one bullet and two guns, apparently. Fun character. But what grounds this? What makes it real? What what's he like when he goes home to his son? What is that like?
Yeah.
And that's why teaching viewpoints is so much easier than teaching like just a regular improv class, because then you get to deal with physical impulses and you don't have to worry about what they themselves think that they would do or they themselves think that a character would do, because all they have to do is receive what was given to them and just let their body do whatever and then react to that. So they're reacting to themselves as opposed to the actual thing. So that's why I enjoy teaching that as opposed to I don't know. I've only really done both beginner improv where I'm not really focused on people. I don't care if they're playing wacky things, and then viewpoints. That's it. Sorry.
Teaching wise, you typically will teach earlier beginner improv or viewpoints. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like for the more developed thing, I prefer to teach something that it's a bit more comprehensive as opposed to all the kind of jumbled language of the normal improv pedagogy.
Yeah, I honestly like it gets kind of there. I think there's only so many ways to introduce people to improv, and like a handful of types of exercises or even specific exercises that help get people into like give and take and group work and basic acting as improvisers. But I agree. I like once you get past that. Go ahead, Bob.
Well, James, I've been told you only have to give them the hard notes, and then that fixes everything. Whoever came up with that concept, the hard notes. Oliver, have you ever been asked for like, oh, can you just give me the hard notes?
I've been told by people that they can take it. So it's like, hey, If
We're-
you have any hard, I can take it. So feel free. I like that. I like that when I'm, but it's like I'll I tend to do the same with most people, kind of thing. If I see that anybody's like super uncomfortable with being criticized, then
Right.
I'll lay off a little bit, kind of thing. But I mean, you're gonna get the same thing from me because again, it's such a concrete and straightforward kind of uh, method of teaching
No,
that it
I
doesn't really
like
require a hard note.
the whole concept is there are notes, and then there are the magical hard notes that will solve all your improv problems.
Yeah,
Is what I was commenting on.
like you're keeping it a
I
secret.
gave you 6 really good notes that if you just focus on any one of those, it'd be amazing. This magical hard note that I keep in my safe, I don't know when I'm going to give that to you.
Yeah,
Yeah, and maybe that's just them wanting to get the most out of their money, right? They're like, "Hey, I just paid $100 for this 8-week course, and it seems a little bit high for your time. But I had better be like 10 times better by the time I get out of here. So hard notes or nothing."
yeah.
Yeah, that's not the way that it works. Generally, the ones who say that they can take it and they want the hard notes, they're the ones who are the least willing to actually open up and learn, because if they aren't listening to the notes they're getting,
Right.
Yeah,
what are you
I think
what are you gonna do?
people who want those hard notes, I would agree, are probably thinking that it's simpler than it is, right? That's really what it is. There's impatience or trying to
Or they already
reduce.
have it, and they just want you to agree that they do, and that's
Yeah,
the hard.
you got it going on. You're doing
Hey,
great.
man, let's see more of that crazy cop character.
So I'm curious, Oliver, talking about the different types of truth, even in like different performing styles, because like clown, um, is more directly connected with the audience, and it's about connection, and being open and connected to the people that you're performing for. Whereas in improv, we have some, uh, uh, even if it's a fragile fourth wall, it's still a fourth wall. Um, and I'm wondering, like you mentioned, like the truth in the room and the experience of what the audience is feeling and thinking, and how it matches up with the performers. Like how do you latch on to that connection and that sense of what's true to everybody in the room as an improviser if you do have that um fourth wall more up, you know?
Uh, I personally, I think that the fourth wall energetically is useless. In live performance, it's useless. You can, you don't obviously have to pretend that there's always people watching you in every single scene you're in, but you as the actor always need to be aware that there are people there in the room with you. And so even if your character is, straightforward talking to this person, you, the actor, need to be reacting to everything that is there. Um, and so I would say that if you want to get better at that, hosting shows is amazing for that, especially like game based shows, because you are consistently ramping up energy. You are talking to the audience and kind of like making them feel comfortable. Um, Stand up is good for that. Dealing with hecklers is the number one way to do that. Clown, of course, because it's all audience based. But yeah, I'd say that I have a finicky relationship with the fourth wall, because I understand very much so that what is happening here is happening here. But if there's a huge reaction to something that you said, then that's going to be something that you bring back. And if you put up that kind of emotional and energetic fourth wall, you're not going to feel all that. And again, that's something that I feel like just comes with practice and a lot of hosting.
Yeah, because you can't prioritize it either, right? You can't put too much emphasis on it. So it's helpful for earlier improvisers to work to learn to worry about it or think about it less, because it's usually like very distracting or often distracting for people to like think about or cater to the audience. But even if you're told to kind of like get rid of that awareness, eventually you do want to reintroduce it. At least I totally agree with what you said. Energetically, the fourth wall is useless. At the end of the day, in my mind too. What about for you, Bob?
No, I agree. Because I do like those moments when we go into the audience and it just I love using the whole theater. I don't think a carpenter should tell you where your scene starts or ends. So at the stage is just a platform where we start, but I'm all about going all over the place. And
a carpenter shouldn't tell you where your scene starts and ends. That's
wow.
great.
Yeah.
I just thought of that. You're welcome.
Put that on a shirt. Put that on a shirt, Wick.
Yeah.
No, because then someone will think I'm talking about Jesus and I'll get in trouble.
True. Yeah. Like, this guy anti-Jesus.
Wow. And the scene is like, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So maybe while we have the just a few minutes left to talk, yeah. What about different audiences? Whether it's between Toronto and LA or stage to stage, like the truth that some like a different politically minded or socially minded audience will feel. What kind of experience have you had with that, Oliver? Either obviously pre-pandemic or like in election years like 2016 or during like tumultuous social events. How does it change the tone of the room and how you can play into it or not?
I feel like you can present ideas that are out there and topics that are out there. You can present it in a way that your character either genuinely believes it or doesn't, and the audience will have their own opinion of it. Now, where that scene goes, like where that's up to the scene, but to simply present those ideas, I don't think. Well, sometimes there's an audience that is a little more uptight about certain issues, but you just have to take that L. I think if you're experimenting with a new audience kind of thing, and you put something out there and it doesn't work, it's like, great. Well, hopefully you're playing with, hopefully this Toronto boy is playing with other Detroit improvisers who can, guide this scene now into something that Detroit audiences are a little bit more comfortable with. And then I'll just follow that lead. But yeah, I feel like there's not really a hard and fast. It does definitely vary by city. I feel like, and again, in LA, I've done mostly only the clown and idiot stuff, more so than improv. But they like those hard truths. Toronto likes when you do that, but you make sure that it's funny. You got to make sure that it's funny in Toronto, or else you're going to lose an audience. Detroit, sometimes when it comes to I feel like Detroit's a little bit more kind of split down the middle in terms of sensibilities. So
that's fair.
Yeah. So I've brought up stuff that like went over super well in Toronto because everyone agrees with me. And then, at Go Comedy, I'd have like half the audience be with me and half the audience be like, where's he going with this?
Right.
Yeah.
So you just gotta.
What's your?
You just gotta follow.
Because I completely agree with Oliver when it comes to Detroit. The house can be really different night from night, or even 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock audience can be really different minded. So I kind of like how Larry David does on Curb Your Enthusiasm. There's something in the zeitgeist that, because usually when we do a showdown, we get slips and people write down a bunch of suggestions. There's something in the zeitgeist. I like to play with it, but in a way that it really doesn't really talk about it, like the thing that's whatever it is, but use it in a different way. For example, in the last Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry David had this really great bit. You know, his character doesn't like being around people. He doesn't like being bothered. And he found out if you wore one of those mega hats, like people just avoid you. So even though that's not his political views, he was just wearing the hat and we're just watching people run away. Like it got him out of like lunch dates and, you know, all this other stuff. And like to him, it was like, I found gold. I don't agree with what the hat says, but this hat has value. And that was really interesting to me. And I think no matter where you are politically, you can find humor in that because there is truth in that. So I like using it, like using that kind of stuff in a unique way, unique to a different character that I created. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, it's probably one of the trickier things to do is find that that nuance where, that hat example is great. Is that like no matter what you think about the hat and the message on it, the fact that it is so controversial that it could act as a social repellent is something I think we can all agree on, and it's tough to do in an improvised setting, but still building those sensibilities and finding things that are true regardless of your agreement or stance on something is really valuable and I'll say advanced.
And I think because that's framing. It's like you know the character, you know his intent, and then so when he's wearing the MAGA hat, you know what's up. If you just were to walk in there and see Larry David in a MAGA hat, you'd be like, oh no, what Larry David too? But you have the frame in there. You have that initial, you know, you have the scene start, or you have the point of view of the character that can then be taken however the audience wants it, kind of thing. But the people who know what you're talking about and like agree with you, they're like, ha. And the people who don't, they're like, what? And they're like, I don't know. I've had that before where it's like I framed arguments in a way that the people who didn't agree with me were also on board with the scene, but maybe didn't. I don't know what they walked away thinking, but hopefully it was like, should I question that? I don't know.
Yeah.
But provocative, right?
Framing as a device is very important for sure.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we're just about out of time. So before we let you go, Oliver, first of all, thank you for joining.
Yeah, bud. Thank you.
And can you tell us about some of the stuff that you're doing in the virtual space, that ways that people can check you out?
Yes. Well, the number one thing that I'm doing now most often is called Sinking Ships. It is an Instagram live, no, not an Instagram live, an Instagram stories weekly show. Me and my buddy Miles McGee, we choose a different song every week and put up our music video where we have to be on screen lip syncing the entire time, just a minute long. We put it up every Friday at 7 p.m. Pacific and 10 p.m. Eastern, and voting is open as long as the story is open, so 24 hours. And I'd love you to check it out.
You vote on?
You vote on, so it's the stories, and so there's usually 4 panels for a minute, and then 4 panels for the next video, and then after that, there's a little vote sticker, and it says Oliver or Miles who won, and then you get to do that. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
The battle between you're not doing the same video. You're presenting. You're going head to head for who had a better video.
Yes, it's a lip sync competition. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Sorry, I missed the competition word, but
I might. But we got clarity. Go ahead.
We discovered the truth.
Another couple of podcasts that I've been on recently, Real True Facts. It's a podcast where it's basically like Dr. Know-It-All, except 2 people are interviewing one comedian as an expert. I did Angels and Demons. The conclusion of that is that angels are capitalists. So it's a fun one to watch, Real True Facts. And the other one I just did was The Pen is Mightier, I think it's called. And it's a fan fiction, an old fan fiction live show from Toronto, but he decided to put that into a podcast. And I just did, my property was Settlers of Catan. So if you want some Settlers of Catan erotic comedic fan fiction,
And we all do.
The pen is
We all do. Yeah.
One more time with the name of that one.
The pen is Mightier, I believe.
Awesome. Okay, we'll make sure that we add all that stuff to the description once we're done here.
Right.
But again, thanks so much for joining. It's very good to see you. Glad you're doing well. And we had a great time chatting with you.
Yeah, lovely to see you both as well. Thanks so much.
And thanks to Heather for chiming in with great
Yes.
comments here.
Always appreciated.
Yeah. Bob, do we have any updates? I feel like we always leave this without doing updates on Improv FAQ stuff.
We are all caught up as far as the what's called the podcast. We're all caught up. So
Sweet.
I mean, you can always see the newest stuff on our YouTube channel and our Facebook. But as soon as all the audio stuff is buffered and processed, it's we load it now. It's nice. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and I saw the last thing
technology.
Once the podcast is done buffering.
Once we put it on the cassette tape, I send it out to the producers, and it gets done.
And also there are a few new lecture episodes on topics like Game of the Scene and Yes and available on. I think those are actually should be. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. I should make sure I know the details before I start talking about it. But they're definitely on YouTube. Those new lecture episodes. I'm 90% sure they're on Facebook, and I'm 80% sure they're on Instagram. So check for them, and if you can't find them anywhere, just know that YouTube is your sure shot place to find them. Okay, thanks again for a great conversation and for tuning in. We'll catch you next time on Improv FAQ at length. Bye.
Bye.